Good morning. It's actually a sunny morning today. So you can see this Aliceara in the light. Look at that. It is so beautiful. So this came bare root and it just has some sphagnum moss around it that was put around it just as a placeholder. So I'm going to be potting this up today to make sure it stays healthy and keeps its beautiful blooms. And it has a second bloom spike coming here, so definitely want to make sure that this stays healthy so it can put on its full performance. In the sunlight here, it definitely has a sort of peppery smell, like if you were to grind up fresh pepper. It smells like that. So it's kind of odd for a beautiful flower, but definitely some Oncidium types and even Callias and stuff have sort of a spicy scent. So that's what this one has for me at least. There's the tag again, Aliceara Tahoma Glacier. So I generally do all of my repotting in the carport unless it's the dead of winter or something like that. So the first thing I'm going to do is take this out of its pot. It's got a plastic bag inside with the sphagnum moss. So I'm going to have a look at the roots first, and then I'm going to get it into a terracotta pot. So this is the situation I have going on here. So I'm going to cut off the bag and have a look at the roots. So I don't really like the look of this here. I'm going to definitely be spraying with hydrogen peroxide. I'm going to pull away some of this moss and have a look here. I see some roots. Oncidium type plants can be fragile in the roots, so I have to be careful. I'm going to spray all of them down with hydrogen peroxide. This has been sitting in its little plastic bag moss situation for about a week and a half now, since the Victoria Orchid Show. I think that's where this came from, because Equigenera was selling some plants there. So I'm going to clean this up with hydrogen peroxide, and then I'm going to choose a terracotta pot. I pre-looked at a pot that was, I don't know, maybe on the smaller size, but I don't want to over pot this either. When you plant in pumice, like I do, you need a bigger pot than you would need if it was moss and bark, but you don't want to over pot either, because then it takes too long to dry out and then you can get root rot happening. So I have my hydrogen peroxide in an old spray bottle from Hair Stuff. You can buy hydrogen peroxide in spray bottles too, but you know, I'm reusing and reducing here. So I'm spraying down the roots, and I'm also spraying down this weird area here where the pseudobulb is, because I don't like the look of it. And hopefully prevent anything from spreading if something is actually happening there. So I'm cutting off some of these things, like the one that was over here on the suspicious one. And look at, there's a new little pseudobulb coming out there, so that's nice. Sometimes places like that are places where pests can hide or where bacterial or fungal infections can spread from. So, you know, it's good to keep your plant tidy. Okay, I'm looking over on the other side now. I flipped the plant, and that looks not great. I'm definitely going to spray that area there. So you can see when roots are dead, like these, have the sheath of the root gone here. So I can trim off some of these that are looking dead. I don't want to interfere too much though with the roots here, because I don't want to traumatize the plant. I really don't like the look of this pseudobulb. It looks like it's rotting and it's going to spread its rot. So I'm just going to cut it off. It's obviously an old one anyways, so I'm just going to cut around it to get rid of it. I partially twisted it off and cut it. That looks like it's just rotting all the way up, so that's good to get rid of. I trimmed back some of the roots a bit. I'm going to leave it now because I don't want to just overly traumatize this plant and have it fail or lose its bloom or its new bloom spike. So I've been looking between two different pot sizes here. This is the bigger of the two. This is about 8 inches terracotta, and then this one here is 6 inches. And I don't think that the 6 inches is big enough. If you look at the roots here, the depth of the roots is basically the depth of this. So I'd have very little pumice in here. so it probably wouldn't have enough moisture. It's also an Oncidium type, which means I'm going to have to use more moss than I usually would when I'm potting up an orchid. So things like Cattleyas are almost cactus-like, so you don't really need much. Sometimes I put a bit in there to help them root when I first repot them. But with this one here, it's Oncidium type. It's going to want some moss around the roots to keep it moist enough in between waterings. So I'm going to put it into the bigger pot, but I'm going to make sure I put a slightly thicker layer of the red lava rock at the bottom, just to make sure that there's really good drainage and that it doesn't stay wet for too long. So I'm starting out with a clean terracotta pot here. This was previously used. I've washed it out. I've got red lava rock as my base layer in the bottom for drainage. I have a layer of pumice on top that I've previously washed. Otherwise, it's kind of on the sandy side, so it can be good to give it a rinse before you pot it up. If you don't, well, then it's just going to come out when you're watering for the first few times, so it's kind of messy. I water on my deck, unless it's the dead of winter though, so whatever, the deck gets a bit dirty. So this can be a bit tricky. You try to figure out what level you want the bulbs to sit at in your pot. So I previously put some pumice in, and I'm looking now to see where the bulbs are hitting compared to where the rim of the pot is here. And I'm also going to need to position it so the growth of the orchid has room to go. So I'm going to be pushing back the pseudo bulbs to the back of the pot, the ones that have already gone. And the new areas like this one here, I want the most space to be here so that the orchid has somewhere to go and I don't need to repot it immediately, because that would be annoying. So the level of this looks pretty good. I'm going to be adding some pumice around and also some moss. So the sphagnum moss will be more around the roots and then pumice all around that. Okay, I have that firmed in pretty well. I'm going to put on the tag when I actually potted it up so that I remember. And I'm going to give it a good watering. Today is my orchid watering day, so I'll have it on the deck with the other ones to water them, and then position it in my south-facing window area where I grow my warm orchids. This doesn't need as much light as some of my orchids like Cattleyas and Vandas, so it's not going to be as close to the few grow lights that I do have. As it is, I don't know how long it's actually going to be in this pot. It's kind of getting close to the edge anyways, but at least it won't be out of there as fast as if I had used the 6-inch. So yeah, it can be kind of difficult choosing what size of pot to put with your orchid. The downside to terracotta compared to plastic is it can be a lot harder to get the orchid out, especially if it gets really root bound. The terracotta, sometimes the roots stick to it. Some people will just smash the pot to get it out. Other people, you know, cut the roots out or separate them as best they can, but it can cause massive root damage and set back the plant. I like terracotta because it breathes well and lets the moisture leave. And I have had problems in the past with fungal stuff. I'm growing in a house, not a greenhouse. So, you know, you can end up with not having it dry out fast enough, and then you get root rot or even bulb rot happening. So yeah, you really have to look at your conditions when you choose how to pot up stuff. The other thing I'm going to do is just lightly wire it in place with a stake and a bit of wire to a couple of the pseudobulbs here. It may be a bit flopsy while it settles in and grows some roots into this pot. So I'm doing that to make sure it doesn't fall over and break its flower spike or the new one that's coming up there. So I've written on the tag when I potted this, and now I'm going to water it. One more tip about Oncidium types, in case you haven't heard it, is after you fertilize them, if it's a fertilizer day, wait 20 minutes and then flush it with just water to get rid of any excess salts from the fertilizer. Oncidium types can end up with a lot of spotting on them if they have too much fertilizer and they don't get flushed properly, so that can help.